Hello and welcome everyone to the Jerusalem Institute of Justice's fourth weekly webinar since the beginning of our Operation Swords of Iron, which opened up on October 7th. Last week we had the honor of hearing from the Israeli ambassador to the UN in Geneva, and I encourage you to visit our YouTube page so that you can watch the recording and hear really candid and thorough reflections from an experienced diplomat from Israel on the challenges of navigating international public diplomacy during this time of war. So today we're at about 34 days of war. We've grieved the loss of over 1,400 civilians. 354 Israeli soldiers have been killed since October 7th. That includes about 30, somewhere between 31 and 34 since Israel entered the Gaza Strip in a ground operation. So far, the Israeli Defense Forces have destroyed about 100 tunnels in Gaza. And right now, the army is enacting pauses for 4 hours every day to allow civilians to evacuate to the southern part of Gaza. So yesterday, about 50,000 people from Gaza used this humanitarian corridor. There are now 94 trucks of humanitarian aid that are going into the southern part of Gaza daily in order to care for people's needs. In Israel, there are about 125,000 Israelis under evacuation orders, and that's because they live within 2 kilometers of the Gaza or the Lebanon borders. And there are many more than that who have voluntarily evacuated. I want to start our conversation today with Advocate Rotem Ben-Simchon, who leads our legal aid department. Now, Rotem and her team of JIJ lawyers, they already have a really great reputation in the Israeli bar for their effective advocacy on behalf of ethnic and religious minorities in Israel. They also have deep expertise in the fields of immigration law, nonprofits, and corporations. But Rotem, since the war began, your team has made a really big pivot. And you've been setting up free legal aid clinics in the hotels that are hosting hundreds and thousands of displaced families. So suddenly, as you told me yesterday, you're learning to handle new areas of the law, including property issues, guardianship issues, and weapons permits. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the clients that you've been representing during this first month of war?
Yes. First of all, hi, everyone. Yes, so Monique, it's very painful to talk to me about this issue. It's the first time I'm lawyer since 2010, and it's the first time for me as an advocate in Israel that it's really difficult, complicated, and heartbreaking stories that I'm trying to focus and stay very professional, and at the same time, I'm crying with them. I'm crying with the clients. I feel that from story to story, it becomes harder and harder to understand how bad the situation is. No one talk in the news about those miserable families that very suffering and don't have anyone to help them. So they all evacuated from their houses and they staying in hotels. Now you have to understand they have one room for a whole family, and sometimes it can be 9, 10, even 15 when it comes to 7 or 8 kids at the same room. They needed to leave the house with barely nothing and just stay there until no one knows when. It's not going to be 30 days and not 2 months. It's going to be months and months. Now they said it's going to be till the end of December. And the end of December is not so soon. Those kids are without schools, without kindergartens. They homeless. They don't have anything to do. Most of the day, they're just sitting in the lobby, crying for their life and try to find solutions. Now, let's go deeper to what I'm doing as a lawyer. So we went a few times to a few hotels in Jerusalem. We sitting there from 8 a.m. and just sitting with those family and hear their problems, hear their issues. Now, kids coming to me and begging for help. Now, I'm talking to you about 8 years old or 9 years old that coming to me and telling me, I have no parents. My parents got murdered and I need help. I need help from you to see how can I get the heritage? How can I get the house? What am I supposed to do? I don't have anyone to go with. I don't have money. I have barely family that can take care of me. Can you help me get guardianship? Can you help me get someone to so he can take control over me? I'm trying to be the strong as I can, and this is our work now, just to give them a big hug and find the solutions for them. And this is what we do. There are many families with shelter problems. They have no, the shelters are not stable. They have problems. You can't lock them and they're afraid to go back to their houses. And this is crazy. In this crazy reality and in the middle of a war, all they think about is how they can go back to their houses without having a safety place to hide from those terrorists. I mean, what a crazy world. And they crying in front of me saying, we're so afraid from the day we need to go back home. Now, there are many families that told me that they came inside the Arabs, especially in Sderot city, and they stole things and broke things and took so many things and money and they have nothing now. They have to start from the beginning. Um, they have problems with their workplaces. They don't want to pay salary anymore. They have no work to go back to. So no money, lots of money issues, weapons, shelters, wills, power of attorney, many kinds of power of attorney. And there are people that need help emotionally, to talk to them, to hug them, especially the kids. They have problems with the government to get their expenses and money that they're supposed to get back from the government, and we helping them to get the money back. But it feels so, it's crazy. No one understand that it's not going to end soon. Maybe the war will end in a few months. I don't know, but I hope so. But those families, they're not gonna go to their home like all of us and just go back to routine and normal family and life like nothing happened. There are kids that lost their members, their families, their parents, their brothers and sisters. I had someone a week ago that he told me, I'm not gonna go back to my house without a weapon because my brother murdered in front of my eyes. And this is what I see all day, all the time, when I go to sleep, when I wake up in the morning, when I'm taking a shower, when I need to eat. This is all I think about. I have 4 kids and I need a gun, a big one. Please help me. Because and the only thing I'm thinking of is I'm gonna do not 100%, 300% to help you as much as I can. Because bottom line, they have no money, they have nothing. All they have is a non-profit organization and lawyers that do everything pro bono and willing to help them and no charging. And this is not, we can't take it for granted now in Israel because there is no, I don't know about lawyers that do it pro bono. There are, but maybe some, but not a lot. And we are one of the only organizations, I know for sure in Jerusalem, but even in Israel, they're doing everything for free. And even if it's something that I'm not professional in, I'm teaching myself. It's challenging, it's hard, it's very complicated sometimes, but I can't refuse to those people. And I know that if I'm not going to give them the help, then they have no one to go and they have no money to pay other lawyers. So they have us, they have JIJ now. We have more than 85 cases now, legal cases that we're helping many kind of to kids, to minors, to families, to individuals, to anyone that's coming and need help. And it's from mouth to mouth. So I'm still getting calls, and we're doing the best we can. It's very, very hard and painful to hear the stories. You can get used to it, even when you hear it all day. But every story is just,
Rotem,
it's the
Rotem, what you're doing is so incredible. Can you tell us, you told me about a really little boy who came to you. He's one of your first clients. Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, so he's 8 years old. He's from Alumim. It's a kibbutz in Jerusalem that the Hamas at the 7th of October got into, and they kidnapped families from there and parents, and they went to the shelter, and after, I don't know, a few hours, they came inside to the house. He hid in one of the closets there, and the parents were at the living room, and they killed the parents. And he stayed there until someone from the army came in and took him. He has an aunt that take care. She's gonna be the one that will take care of him from now on. But there is a process that has to be done. We need to go and do all the process with court and ask her to be his guardianship. But you can never, I mean, it's video, but it doesn't matter how much I'm going to try to explain the situation when a 8 years old kid coming to me and begging for help, saying that he lost his parents and that they died, both of them, and he has no brothers and sisters. It just, I don't know. I don't know how can you move on. It's just too hard to understand.
Mhm.
I'm really, I mean, we're gonna do the best we can, and we're gonna help him for sure. I mean, this is my, until from now on, until the end of the war and after the war, this is our goal, to help those that need the help, kids, and minors and brothers and sisters and father and all the kind of families from Sderot and from Alumim and from Kfar Aza and all the places that the Hamas were there at the 7th of October, because they all have kind of problems that needs to be fixed. And this is what JIJ is the main goal now, and we are here for them, and hopefully we're gonna help as much as we can. So next week we're gonna go to more hotels and to hear more stories and to get more legal cases, and hopefully we can help as much as we can. And it doesn't matter if this is our expertise or not. We're just teaching ourselves and do what needs to be done, because this is the reality in Israel now, the sad reality that no one talk about. I mean, people talking about the kidnap, all those that were kidnapped, but today, and for this 5 minutes that I'm more than 5 minutes, I do want to say that all the rest of the families that evacuated, they have so many problems. So there are so many families that we don't hear about that has many issues and problems and things that needs to be done.
Rotem, I'm getting a question from the audience. Does JIJ have enough lawyers to handle what needs to be done?
Unfortunately not. I mean, I have two lawyers. I'm the head of the legal aid department. I have two lawyers that helping to this situation, but that's it. We can afford it. It's a budget issues, and I wish, and I think that it's very necessary and very important for all those families and all those people that need JIJ now and need pro bono legal aid, need someone that's not gonna think money and not gonna ask and charge money. You just want to help them because you really want to help them and not think about the money. So yes, I wish we could have more because the cases keeps coming and coming and it grows and grows from day to day. So it's not easy at all. I hope that somehow we could get more lawyers and grow and can help more families.
Yeah.
Amen.
So you guys heard it. It's, 85 families affected by war, 3 lawyers to help them, doing our level best. Your contributions to the JIJ Emergency Crisis Fund make a critical difference here. And they make the difference between, how many families we can truly serve, how many more lawyers we can add to our team. So if you haven't made a contribution yet, I encourage you to go to jij.org/donate. I want to invite on another one of our Israeli lawyers, Ori Murad. He's the head of our International Law and Public Diplomacy Department. Ori, your team has been so busy working across the globe and reinforcing the state of Israel on an international stage in Geneva and New York and Washington, D.C. Help our audience understand what your team has been up to for the last month.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Monique. As you've mentioned, the past 4 weeks or so were very, very intense. We all working around the clock. And in the past month or so, JIJ, or more particularly JIJ's International Law and Public Diplomacy Department, actually been active in, I would say, 4 different fronts. For us at the moment, top priority is to ensure the release of the hostages that are still held in the Gaza Strip by the Islamic Jihad and by Hamas. So far, we've reached out to the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, urging them to fulfill their mandate, actually, by communicating with the hostages and to facilitate the release immediately, the release unconditionally of all the hostages. We're also preparing to bring the family of one of the hostages, maybe even more than one, to the Human Rights Council in Geneva in order to allow them to speak using our or JIJ's ECOSOC status, special consultative status, to allow them to share their personal story and to create more and more awareness for that, which is something that I see of a particular importance at the moment. The whole world needs to understand what exactly has been done on October 7th and what is the personal stories of each and every one of the hostages. Maybe under the same umbrella, using JIJ's special consultative status at the United Nations, we work together with the actually various UN bodies, including the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Special Rapporteur on Torture, UNICEF, they're responsible for helping children, the UN women that are responsible for helping women in those situations, with basically one clear message: comply with your mandate and actually actively work to safeguard the rights and lives of the victims here in Israel. That is something that we put a lot of emphasis on, and I have to admit that so far we're doing, and maybe all our teams doing really great job on that particular notion. Moving on to one more front that we're now handling very intensively, I would say, with the European Union. We're engaging now with the European Commission, actually, to advocate for the EU to seize immediately all the finance, all the transfer of money to Hamas, and to guarantee that the aid, which is definitely very important, will reach the right hands, which means that the money flowing into the Gaza Strip will reach innocent civilians and not Hamas, that is making sure to put their filthy hands on everything that comes in to the Gaza Strip, including water and electricity and food and medicine and so on and so forth. And part of it is the money coming in and flowing in from the European Union. So we need to make sure that the new, I would say, change of tone coming from the European Parliament that basically supports this idea is to pressure the European Commission, using that new tone coming from the European Parliament in order to pressure them to stop the funding to Hamas, again, at least until they will make sure that the money goes to the right hands. That is another effort that we're now focusing on, and maybe something that we do constantly. And for me, one of the most important things that we do is helping the very intricate challenge of the Israeli hasbara or Israeli advocacy or public diplomacy. It's a very tough battle. The lies and the twisted coverage of the conflict from so many different places is completely twisted, and that is a battle that we need to be more engaged in. I know that the state is not, unfortunately I have to say, it is not doing enough, which means that civil society organizations like JIJ needs to take this burden on our shoulder, and it means that we need to put more efforts and more manpower to assist the Israeli public diplomacy efforts as well.
Ori, it seems that outside of Israel, there is a growing sense, we hear rhetoric like this on the streets, that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, that they are freedom fighters, and that maybe the atrocities of October 7th never actually happened, or that it was a false flag attack, or it wasn't that bad. And from my perspective, it amounts to, like, it's similar to Holocaust denial. And I wonder your reflections on, the best ways to counter this kind of narrative that's seeping into the consciousness of the West.
It's a good question. It's actually a mix of different elements that needs to be changed. I think that we need to take a few steps back and try to challenge the paradigm that Israel perceives in terms of hasbara or in terms of public diplomacy. In Hebrew, hasbara, or in English, hasbara means explaining. So the narrative that Israel needs to explain everything, which means we're looking at things from the kind of a victim chair, needs to be changed. Israel's hasbara in general have so many different complexities and so many different challenges, starting with there's no clear, coherent, cohesive message that goes through from all of the government, including the civil society organizations. So for me, we need to be in line with other messages as well, and to create one narrative that together we can straighten that narrative and push that forward. But again, diving into the complexities or the challenges the Israeli official hasbara is suffering from, we need the whole session or a whole day just to talk about that. Again, unfortunately, to find myself criticizing the government at the moment is not something that I want to be involved in at the moment, to be honest, but it's inevitable. Like, we all see the pictures, we all see what is happening, we all see the twisted coverage from all over the world. Actually, it comes from Europe, from Western Europe, from Eastern Europe, from the States, from Canada, so basically everywhere. It's not only the Muslim world, it's basically happening everywhere. And for JIJ in particular, our efforts is, again, we need to be honest, it's a battle that is very, very hard to win. And it starts with the numbers. I didn't want to go into it, but I'm like, I don't know, I'm drawing into it. But we need to understand a fundamental thing in terms of public diplomacy and the challenge that Israel is facing in the moment. And it starts with a simple answer. The numbers are against us. There are, I don't know, 14, 15 million Jews around the world, maybe a few more millions that support Israel, but it's not enough. The numbers on the other side are 100 times more, 1,000 times more. So it's a challenge, or it's a battle that is very hard at the first place. We're doing our best. I think that we do a great job. We're facing the most complex issues. We're not afraid of confronting hard questions, and it starts with that.
Yeah. So before we go into the Israeli ground operation, I want to bring in Flavia, because some of this misinformation is causing it's really inspiring a lot of anti-Semitism around the world. We saw the blood libel of this accusation that Israel bombed a hospital when in fact it was a rocket from within Gaza, and that caused immediately riots across the world. And there have been all kinds of accusations, even this idea of Hamas not being a terrorist group, and amplification of artificial intelligence and manufactured photos, that look like they're from Gaza. Sometimes those photos and videos are from actually Syria. Sometimes they're from prior, wars in Gaza. Just yesterday, there was a blistering expose showing that many of the photographers that work for the Associated Press, for Reuters, for the Washington Post, for the New York Times, were right there embedded with Hamas on October 7th, invading into Israeli territory. And that raises huge questions about the actual neutrality of the press. There's pictures now coming out of prominent Palestinian journalists getting kissed on the cheek by Yahya Sinwar, who's the mastermind of the October 7th operation. And so all of this misinformation is driving anti-Semitism. So Flavia Sival, their CEO, can you come on and just kind of give everybody a recap of how this is trickling in and impacting Jewish people outside of Israel?
Yes, thank you, Monique. Yes, anti-Semitism is drastically affected by the October 7 attacks on Israel, and now the war is affecting day-to-day life of Jewish communities in the diaspora. So we see a great increase of an anti-Semitic event. So, for example, it is reported that there is an increase of 500% in the overall volume of these events compared to the same period last year. And what is very interesting to me that is a third of all anti-Semitic events were reported in the United States. And mainly, of course, in areas where Jewish population is high, like New York, Florida, Chicago, California, and another interesting point is that these activities were recorded also in major universities and colleges and Ivy League universities. And it's not only in North America, but it's also in Europe, where in Germany, in France, in the UK, there's also been a significant increase in violent anti-Semitic incidents by a 330%. And alongside this, there is an increase on the desecration of Jewish places like cemeteries or synagogues by 128%. And the same with harassment, an increase of 660%, or threats, 300% rise in threats to the Jewish people. And that is not counting the online anti-Semitic discourse. So there as well, like you were talking, because the online is where everybody is to know what is happening, and we hear whatever our likes are, we hear more and more of the same ideas all the time. So a recent research shows that there is an increase of 400% compared to 2 weeks before the war in this anti-Semitic discourse. And also there is an interesting fact that this specific war, this military operation, has received more online anti-Semitism than previous ones, like Guardians of the Wall, and Black Belt. So these operations specifically has a peak on anti-Semitism discourse in the social media. So all these forms of anti-Semitism are really subjecting the Jewish community into fear, and we hear of many communities where they're asking everyone to take all the Jewish symbols out of not even wearing them, And I was personally very sad to hear a friend of mine that called me in that she's their home is in Spain, and told me that they just removed their mezuzah from the front door of their house, and that especially touched me in a personal way. The first thing you do when you enter your home, even if it's rented or you buy a home here in Israel, is you put that mezuzah on your door, and is part of the blessing of your home. So even in the diaspora, in the Jewish people have to take off from the symbols that belong to them, to their well-being, their safe space, like it's their house.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the diaspora. I live in the New York area, and my own son last week was called a dirty Jew by a kid from the neighborhood, and it's clear that this anti-Semitic discourse is trickling into social media, and it's impacting even young children. Young children whose parents may not actually espouse anti-Semitic views, but they're getting indoctrinated to hate Jews through their cell phones and through TikTok and the social media channels that they're seeing. This is the thing about anti-Semitism, is that people who are anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic think that harassing Jews in the diaspora somehow helps them make their point. But all that it does is drive more Jewish people to move to Israel, where, paradoxically, Jewish people feel safer, because in Israel, at least, we have a state, we have sovereignty, we have collective unity, and we also have an army to protect us. So I hate to break this news to the anti-Semites, but it completely backfires, and it also helps to just make the case of the need for the state of Israel. Because if we're not safe outside of the state of Israel, then it necessitates a move to the state of Israel. So on the issue of safety, let's go back to Ori and talk about the status of Israel's ground operation. Ori, what's the status? What's happening? What do you think are also what do you think is likely to happen in the next few days and weeks?
So we're actually counting 30, 33, 34 days still started, and Israel is now basically operating in the Gaza Strip at the moment with 3 divisions, which means a lot of people, a lot of soldiers, including the reserve forces as well, inside the Gaza Strip, diligently working to eliminate terrorists and harming and getting to a lot of specific terrorists that are playing a prominent role in the chain of command as well. So a great success on that point. Worth mentioning that in the context of this war, the IDF is working in a very smart way, coordinated way. So all the efforts actually involves both the ground forces and the assistance of the Air Force, that together is working in a great correlation so far and getting really, really great achievements. They're working really slowly, but safely, but surely, trying to minimize the damage as much as possible, of course, on both sides, by the way, not harming civilians on the Gazan side, and trying to keep the lives of our soldiers. And so far, I think that the IDF successfully target over 2,500 targets, or even 3,000 targets as of today. And after 4 weeks of conflict, Israel is again achieved really significantly military goals, and the IDF is recently actually completed, I think 2 days ago, the encirclement of the Gaza city, that actually is situated located in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where basically several Hamas leaders, including Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad Sinwar, which is Yahya Sinwar's brother, not a lot better than him, by the way, including weapons and rockets and missiles and so on and so forth, are situated again in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and that basically the IDF realized that in order to effectively eliminate targets in Gaza City, we have to basically divide the entire Gaza Strip into the north and south parts. And basically, the division actually ensures a safe evacuation of civilians from the northern part to go down south to the safe zone, allowing the IDF to target only Hamas leaders and Hamas operatives, only combatants, and trying to prevent completely any harm for non-combatants. I think that the evacuated civilians are actually relocated down south because of the proximity to Egypt on the one hand, and that is where basically Hamas is not really situated as strong as on the northern part. One more thing that it allows basically a safe zone on the southern part of the Gaza Strip, allowing trucks coming in with humanitarian aid from Rafah, from the Egyptian border, supplying humanitarian aid, including medicine and food and water and all the things that they need there. Israel is also coordinating efforts to expose Hamas's use of civilian infrastructures, and we know that Hamas is doing a very extensive use in terms of civil infrastructures for their own purposes, of course, including, by the way, Monique, you've mentioned it, if I'm not mistaken, the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip. It's called Shifa Hospital, which is by far the biggest one, serves a lot of people in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas is actually operating from within the hospital itself and below that facility as well. This is basically where all the chain of command and is basically concentrated there, and the entire command center is actually under the Shifa Hospital. And through these efforts, basically, Israel has initiated a global campaign to expose this unacceptable and, by the way, illegal as well, use of civilian infrastructure by Hamas to justify basically Israel's next step, as I see it, and that is to take all the people out of the hospital and then to start working there as well. That is a very, very important point, actually, to ball, because, again, the Shifa Hospital is a very strategic point for Hamas, which means basically that it's a strategic point as well for us to target. And maybe on that note, also important that during all that time, Israel is well prepared, I have to say, with a lot of forces along all its northern border. Again, for any development, we know that Nasrallah is about to speak again on Friday or Saturday again. We still don't know what to expect on that in this arena as well, but Israel and the IDF is very prepared on the northern border as well. And maybe before we conclude this briefing, maybe one thing on a personal note. I say it as a former combat soldier at the IDF. I've been in Gaza 3 years. I did a lot of interesting, dangerous stuff inside the Gaza Strip. I participated in a lot of different activities, let's say that I cannot talk more about. But to see that and from the outside, the extreme, I have to say, extreme positive spirit and the motivation from officers, from simple soldiers, is something that I think Israel never witnessed before. The motivation is so high at the moment that it's even hard to explain, and this feeling of unity is something that goes across all civil level and definitely among our soldiers and the IDF, including reserve and regular soldiers.
Well, Ori, let's try to explain that. Here's my perspective, and I'd love to hear yours. The people of Israel woke up on October 7th, but prior to October 7th, there was a genuine commitment to let's leave Gaza to the people of Gaza. We don't want anything to do with it. Let them handle their own problems. We're pursuing peace with Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries. We're going to send in trucks of aid every day so they can build a functioning society and economy in Gaza. You know, there was this sense of let them have it. we don't want it. And that was shattered on October 7th. And what people woke up in Israel and realized was that we have the Islamic State on our doorstep. And they have greater capabilities than we even imagined, greater capabilities than our worst nightmares. And the Islamic State, by the way, only controlled Mosul and Raqqa, Mosul in Iraq and Raqqa in Syria for a handful of years. And when the United States and its allies went in to flush out the Islamic State from Mosul and from Raqqa, there was unfortunately devastation of the infrastructure. But the advantage that the United States had was that the Islamic State didn't have 18 years to build tunnels underneath Raqqa and Mosul. And so I think Israelis woke up and said, this is an impossible predicament that we have found ourselves in, and nothing other than a complete wipeout of Hamas and a complete devastation of their military capabilities is going to allow us to function at all as a country and allow us to have any modicum of safety. Would you say, Ori, that's accurate and that's driving the unity and the morale?
I think you just mentioned three different issues that we need to address, and maybe let's start breaking them, I don't know, one by one. But you talked about the threats coming in from all sides at the moment. So it goes back. You mentioned Saudi Arabia, and you mentioned the peace process, U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia in this context. Let's not forget that on the other side we have Iran, and we have the proxies on Israel northern border, which means basically per se on the border, on the Israeli border from in Lebanon, threatening Israel from its northern border. More proxies from Yemen going down south. We have Russia supporting them, we have China supporting them. So the axis, what is called the axis of evil, or the red group as we call them, basically constitutes a threat not only on Israel at the moment. So based on mutual interest, I see the developments on the day after. We say in Hebrew on 6 p.m. after the war. It's a saying in Hebrew when we can actually gonna have some more time to mourn, but to think about operative steps looking forward. I think that we need to think more openly about different solutions for the Gaza Strip. 2005, where Israel left basically and basically took out 21 or 22 or 23 different settlements that were going all across the border with the Gaza Strip. It was, again, in retrospective, of course, I think it was a mistake. The conception that says let's give them more money if their Gazan prosperity will influence Israel and we take Israel to a better place, just crashed, completely crashed. And don't forget, we're talking now, it's 2023. Like we're now counting 30 years to Oslo, to the Oslo Accords. So what we've learned, I think that we can all agree on that. What we've learned so far, that every place that Israel basically left and withdrew, we have problems. We see in Lebanon, we know in Judea and Samaria, and now in Gaza. The developments looking forward at the moment is definitely unclear. What we do know, that it looks like at the moment that Israel is building some kind of a similar paradigm of building a kind of an area B, what we call area B, which is basically controlled civically by the Gazans, but security by Israel. And that's what I see basically as the next steps, at least temporarily. That's what's going to happen in the Gaza Strip. We still don't know, and those are things that we're going to find. I think we're going to have more details later on, in maybe a few months or in a year from now. What was, I don't know. Again, this is only my guess and my interpretation, but this coordinated attack on October 7th, basically, one of its objectives were to put some sticks in that wheel of what you've mentioned, the Saudi Arabia, U.S., Israel, peace relations or normalization or whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing in that context. Yeah, unfortunately, the situation is still unclear.
So I want to ask you a legal question. We hear this word proportionality getting thrown around a lot, and there's a lot of pressure from Israel's allies in the West to, hey, please observe international humanitarian law. And I've heard Israeli leaders saying, like, we don't need the constant reminders. We follow international humanitarian law. We have buildings full of lawyers who review all of our decisions before we make them. Like, we're very committed to international humanitarian law, more so even than some of our allies. But in this conversation, it's this word proportionality that's constantly coming up. So from a legal perspective, I mean, everyone's now becoming an armchair expert on international humanitarian law, but you're an actual, you're an actual expert. So Uri, what does this word proportionality mean?
So first, let's start with what is it? What it's not. Proportionality is not Israel going into the Gaza Strip, taking hostage 241 or 240 hostages into Israel and killing children and raping women. And this is not proportionality, okay? And this is very important to understand. But proportionality actually is a legal term, is actually constitute one of 4 core principles of IHL, of international humanitarian law, perhaps the most important one and maybe the most complex one as well to understand. But shortly, I would say the notion of proportionality determines that the expected collateral damage, which means the harm caused to unarmed civilians, will not be excessive compared to the military advantage sought from that particular attack. And we examine that on a case-to-case basis, of course. Maybe in the context of the current war, what we need to understand that harming civilians, although it is sad, I agree on that, but it does not necessarily constitute a war crime. That is, again, as long as the damage is not excessive compared to the anticipated advantage from that particular target or that particular hit. That's basically what it means, proportionality. Again, the most important core principles of IHL, and we still have the principle of distinction and the principle of military necessity and precautions that Israel, I can say on a broader level that Israel, let's say it differently, I don't know a lot of countries in the world that follows and comply with international humanitarian law as Israel. And that is something that I have to admit that I feel very proud, but it's got some cons as well. Israel is very cautious in terms of we choose the targets with a, in Hebrew we say with a pincetta, I forgot the word, sorry, but we choose them like very only if it fits all the requirements and all the elements that makes a target a legitimate target. And once we decide that it is a legitimate target, we work in accordance with the principle of proportionality to make sure to minimize the damage to the minimum. So basically, again, and maybe just one more thing about proportionality. I think that once you understand the rationale that stands behind the proportionality notion, you basically understand IHL. You basically understand international humanitarian law, because all the other core principles are actually enshrined in that particular notion called proportionality.
Yeah, maybe you can address the unique challenge of having one party to this conflict that does observe international humanitarian law and is doing its best to only have proportional responses, and fighting against an enemy that has completely thrown out the rule book and has no regard for it.
I think simple, very simple, in one sentence. Hamas is targeting civilians through rockets, through the October 7th massacre, horrifying massacre, but they're targeting civilians. That's something that we need to understand. On the other side, Israel, I think the most moral by far, you know what, I don't think, I'm saying that and I feel 100% comfortable to say that, Israel is the most moral army in the world, by far, okay? Period. Israel is doing everything in its disposal to make sure to minimize to the minimum the harming innocent civilians, non-combatants, as we call it in the legal term. And that is the whole thing basically folded in 2 sentences. Hamas targets civilians. Israel is avoiding targeting civilians and trying to target only Hamas operatives. That's basically the whole thing.
Yeah, so, and it goes without saying that Everything Hamas has done so far is so clearly a war crime. Taking hostages is a war crime. Raping women is a war crime. Throwing the rockets and targeting civilians with the rockets, that is a war crime. In doing psychological warfare is also a war crime. And then deliberately using their own civilians as human shields, deliberately placing their own infrastructure, their own weapons, their own rocket launchers underneath civilian infrastructure, all of that is an absolute, clear, unequivocal war crime. So let's.
By the way,
really...
sorry for cutting you, Monique. Not only war crimes, crimes against humanity as well, and potentially it constitutes even genocide. And that is something that our legal team is now looking into. But genocide is something that I won't exclude in this case. I won't rule that it amounts to the crime of genocide as well. So we need to be patient, but it is something that JIJ's team is now working on. Not in too many words, genocide basically, the question if it amounts to genocide, yes or not, basically refers to the intent standing behind that act of Hamas. But war crimes, crimes against humanity, and potentially even genocide. Sorry.
No, thank you, Ori. It's an important clarification. So I want to get to some of our questions before we run out of time. So an important question is, what can we do out here, if people who don't live in Israel, how can we be involved? One of the most important opportunities to get involved, I want to encourage you guys to be aware of the March for Israel, which is happening on the National Mall next Tuesday, November 14th. I'm going to be there. JIJ will be there. Many of our partner organizations will be there. It looks like it's going to be a massive rally. It's right now almost impossible to book a hotel room in the DC area inside of the Beltway without spending about $2,000 a night. So if you have a friend or a family member or someone whose house you can stay at, I encourage you to make those kinds of arrangements. And, Jewish federations across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic of the United States are arranging bus transportation and other things. If you can't get a flight or you can't get a train ticket, there are some bus convoys that you can join. So I encourage you to reach out to your local Jewish federation to sign up for that. There are also some Christian groups that are also planning convoys to participate in this march. But we're expecting, somewhere between 250,000 to 500,000 people at this march. So that's an important way to show your support for Israel. The other thing I want to clue you in on is a really important initiative we've been working on with the United States Senate. Right now, we have about a dozen senators who have signed a letter to the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, asking her to get the United Nations to recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization. So probably tomorrow or Monday, we will send out an email with an update on that. And you'll be able to sign our petition and add your voice to that important call within North America. Before we wrap up, we have Teresa from Lancaster County says that she's going to be there. Teresa, hopefully, maybe I'll see you. I don't know. It's going to be a really big crowd. One last question before we wrap up, and maybe Flavia or Ori, you can handle this. It seems that the public opinion in the United States, or maybe France, for example, is really shifting, and it's being more critical of Israel, and it's asking for ceasefires. And the question is, why? Why this shift in public opinion? Do either of you guys want to take this question?
Sure. Thank you, Monique. Yes, I think there is a issue very clear in France, at least, that is connected to demographics, and also the population of the Arab population there is very big, and that creates an anti-Israel atmosphere that we see in many other countries, where the narrative is a narrative of delegitimization, and of course, when the war happens, even more. And the whole discourse nowadays that see automatically the Palestinian people as victims of a long-standing conflict. And when you see and when you see that disproportion, that disproportion in the way the media shows and explain and put forward this war, then it is very clear that the country, the government will follow one way or the other. Politicians and so on are very attentive to their people, and that happens clearly in many countries nowadays, unfortunately.
Yeah, Flavia, I want to address this from the US perspective, because I'm seeing that there's this narrative, there's this binary of oppressor versus oppressed, which has been part of the narrative of far left groups, and the idea, and this has gained a lot of traction with younger people, the idea that if you have power, then you're an oppressor, and if you're powerless or you're marginalized in some respect, then you're the oppressed. And so therefore anyone with power is evil, and anyone who seems to be powerless can do no wrong. And so Hamas raping and murdering and pillaging, well, that's a natural response to oppression. It's a poisonous ideology, which it's real, and it has the potential to trickle into other arenas of American public life. We're also seeing that the sort of terminal limit of a lot of people's progressive sensibilities is the Jewish people. The Jewish people, at least in North America, have been notably and historically allies to historically marginalized communities. The Jewish community of America has been allies to the Black community. We've been allies to the immigrant communities. We've been allies on so many issues, but it turns out that when our people are facing our darkest time, apparently though that need for allyship and for solidarity doesn't apply to us. And that's because we're perceived as powerful. And so that's been really disheartening to watch. But I want to end on a note of hope, because in the midst of this poisonous media atmosphere and campus atmosphere, we're also seeing some bright lights. We are seeing people who are not Jewish standing alongside the Jewish people. Is it a massive upswell? Not yet, and we look for more. But I'm meeting people who are not Jewish at some of these rallies, and they're explaining to me why they're standing beside us, and I find that very moving and heartening. We're also seeing really important discourse within Israeli citizens who are of Arab backgrounds. They're by no means a monolithic community. They have a range of perspectives, but there are many Bedouin Israelis who heroically saved dozens of people. There were many Bedouins who were taken hostage. There were many who were murdered. And so the Bedouin communities in the south of Israel have generally been, wanted to relate positively to the state of Israel. And there's a lot of appreciation within Israeli society for their sacrifice and for their standing with the people. And even many Arab politicians who have seats in the Israeli Knesset are showing a sense, they may have criticism of the government, because again, Israel's not a perfect society. Like any democratic society, it has room to grow. And there are always issues, and there's always a need to better represent and care for the minorities within the society. That's something that JIJ has stood for very strongly before the war, and it's something we'll stand for after. But even those communities that have frustrations with the Israeli government are standing up and saying, we see this threat from Hamas as a threat to us as well. And so we are unified with the society. Now, again, that's not everybody's opinion, but it's a promising sign of hope for the future, and of hope for continued coexistence. So I want to end on that note and give gratitude to all of our listeners, those of you who have hung with us week after week, and encourage you again to come to the rally, the March for Israel in Washington on November 14th, if you're able to make it. Sign our petition next week to the U.S. ambassador to the UN, and give generously online at jij.org/donate. Thanks everyone for your time and for your attention and support today.